The last several weeks, we've been working a lot with shame, and in particular, how it inhibits us. It's hard for us to really show up as our authentic self when we're feeling any kind of shame or uncomfortableness or not safe. So, I wanted to start today with this little summary of some of the components of adult friendships. And as we're reading these, not at all intending for us to be shaming ourselves where we're not ideal. I feel like we fall down maybe a little bit in some of these, but just to look at them and good to refresh ourselves in terms of where am I with all of these. So one of the things we do all the time is work with our own nervous system. When we come out of fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, we're more able to connect. Working with attachment style, Diane Poole Heller. It's really interesting to learn what is my attachment style. They've done a lot of study on this, so it can be helpful to know that too. Once we know what it is, we can work with that more mindfully. This is a big one, this respect for other people's time and where they put their attention. And this sounds really harsh. It's not up to another person to fill our needs and make up for our childhood. And yet, I think that's actually true. And it's the way that things work. So sometimes that might be us that we're really feeling vulnerable and need to be taken care of. Certainly, my earlier romantic relationships were all about that. That's not actually healthy to expect another adult to fill our needs from childhood, even though in a friendship or a romantic partnership, there is some kind of flow around that. We finally feel seen and loved, and that makes a big difference. But to try to be as mindful as we can. I had a period a few years ago where three kind of main supports for me all had something else going on. One of them had moved, they were really focused on their new friends. One of them was recently fallen in love, and so they dropped off the map. But I was really noticing that what I wanted wasn't what they wanted. And what I wanted was for it to continue the way it had. And in fact, it wasn't continuing that way. It's okay to feel sad or left out or jealous or whatever. And it's good for us to still know I can know these things, I can feel these things, and I don't have to put that on them. It's up to me. And so, one of the things that I did and that is helpful to do is just to connect with more people, broaden your base. So, there's lots of people around who interest me. And those three friends, we've come back into connection. But just to look around for people, and that's part of what we do here in this Sunday community is we're interested in each other. We're interested in the kind of deep conversations that we have. And as we're being more mindful, as we're not in a fight, flight, freeze, fawn response, we're not feeling that attachment compulsion, then we can be more appropriate with our risk. So we don't want to be too cautious. If we're in a freeze, for instance, we're going to be, oh no, I don't think I could handle that. And we just kind of open up into the possibility. Sometimes, though, we'll just kind of get into, well, I'm sure everything will be okay. And then we turn a blind eye to what we should be seeing. And then I think this is something that's true in a lot of friendships as well, is that we're not the best friend that we could be for lots of different reasons. And it takes some tolerance to move out of shame around that. And to widen your window of tolerance for, I can handle someone who's turned their attention elsewhere for somebody else right now. It's not what I want. And if what is generating in me is shame, then I could have a look at that. If it's actually often not about us. So, this whole thing around adult friendships is quite complex. And there's a lot of areas in here where we can easily get activated back into core deficiency beliefs or shame. So, this is what we were working with last few weeks. I have a body that feels shame. So it's a feeling, a sensation, and being tuned into that is really helpful. One of the ways that it's helpful is that we can feel that. And if we don't go into a shame spiral, then we can come up out of that slumped posture and come up out of our survival responses and come into awareness. We can actually have a better look at what is the actual situation and what are my options. So now I'm going to just slow down here and go through these. You could choose someone to work with in your mind. Maybe it's an existing friend, a new friend, someone you're having difficulties with. The basic question is this a person that I actually want a deeper connection with? Maybe there's things going on when, in fact, I need to set some boundaries. I'm not happy with it. I feel like they're steamrolling over me. I feel like it's not an equal relationship. So that's a whole other question. But if that's the case, then setting boundaries is the next step. Maybe you could choose somebody else to work with that you actually do still have that optimism around. Yeah, I do want to connect more with them. So now comes the part about the nervous system. How can we help our nervous system allow a deeper connection where we can take that risk to be authentic and vulnerable? So if you're feeling anxious around that person, why? What's going on with that? Do you have experience where they kind of went into a fight response maybe and they said some nasty things? Are they really anxious and you just kind of pick up on that from them? Look into that for a moment. If you feel anxious around that person, what's going on there? And is there enough in this relationship, in this friendship, to make it worthwhile continuing with them? Let your heart answer that question. We have a lot of reasons in our head where, well, I don't want to hurt their feelings, or they've been a friend for 20 years, or I don't want to give up on them right now. But what does your heart know about that? Do I want to deeply connect with this person and deepen that? And if I had a more regulated nervous system, would I handle theirs a little bit better? If we're being activated into that past feelings of powerlessness, that affects our present moment capacity for sure. And so let's back away from the specifics for a moment. And what do you enjoy about the person? So, what do you enjoy? What would you like to change? What's your nervous system doing when you're around that person and when you think about being around them? And let's look into one of the components that you do enjoy. What do you appreciate about them? It might be their sense of humor or their courage. What is it about them? Maybe they really connect and listen. You feel like you could tell them anything. Now, how do you feel about yourself when you are around them? Are you feeling pretty relaxed? Are they easy to be with? Or are you on guard? You might have memories coming up of, well, when I try to share, they actually shut me down. Or when I try to share something, I feel really seen. Again, there's this complexity. This is a big question here. Are you expecting something from them that they don't have the capacity for or that they don't want to give? And it's actually not that reasonable to expect another adult in a friendship to provide for us. So if you are looking to them for the kind of support that you might get from a therapist, for instance, or that you want them to be available all the time whenever you need to discharge some energy, that's really not probably the best thing in a relationship and a friendship. It might be something that they get worn out around, or maybe they've just to be able to do that and now things have changed and they can't or don't want to anymore. As you kind of sift through some of the dynamic, see if you can look at this without shaming yourself. We all do this at times, and we've all had it done to us where somebody's kind of looked to us for some kind of support and kind of objectified us in a way. They don't really see us. There's a desperation there. They don't have the capacity. If you're feeling any kind of shame response in your body, then lift your collarbones, lift your eyes, look around. Yeah, that's something I feel like maybe there's some juice there. I'm going to look into that a little bit more. What is it I want from them? And do they have the capacity for that? So if you have a friend with a really dysregulated nervous system, what you want might be not what they can give you, even if they want to. And then, really specifically, how would you like to shift the relationship? So maybe it's to ask them when you feel them going into a rant or into a fight response, maybe you're going to need to ask them to lower their voice a little, or if that's really activating for you, you might need to do some kind of boundary or a conversation about that. Or maybe it's that you want to spend more time with them, or maybe that you'd like them to focus when you're sharing. You feel like they're really distracted. So, what is it that you'd like to shift that would help you feel more comfortable, more connected? Let's give that a moment. Really, what we're working with here is how our nervous system interferes with our more mature adult self. And how can we see what's going on and then be more realistic about that? So, one of the things that often happens is that we try to read people. Sometimes we read pretty accurately, but a lot of the time we don't. So, what do you know about what's happening in their nervous system generally and when they're with you? So maybe if one of the issues you have with them is that they go off on a rant or that they feel really anxious and aren't paying attention, they're kind of scattered. What's your best sense of why that is? Especially if it's changed over time. A lot of people are a lot more stressed now than we were pre-COVID, even though there was a lot of stress back then too. Or maybe it feels a bit more personal. I feel like they're bored with me. We don't have fun anymore. And is this something you've talked about or you could talk about? Is this something that you see happening in their other relationships as well, other friendships? Does it feel pretty specific to you? Or is it that they just generally have this feeling of distraction or stress? What story are you telling yourself about that, as Brene Brown would say? And this can be kind of difficult too. So, to be kind, you might put your hand on your heart or just remind yourself these are complex. None of us are perfect with this. And what's happening in your nervous system? And what could you do to help that? So, if you notice that maybe it's somebody who often feels anxious, and then you kind of pick that up and you feel more anxious, what could you do? What tools and practices could you bring in? You could soften your shoulders, you could focus on your breath. Or maybe you find that you're the one with that pattern. I'm just listening until I can break in and say something. Or do you find yourself going into a flight response or getting distracted? This is kind of an overview that we could go back into, pause, and really spend some time with each of these. We're just kind of getting an overview of what's my sense of this friendship? What are the patterns that are going on here? And are they expecting something from you that's not appropriate in adult friendships or is not something you have the capacity for or want to give? If you have someone that calls you up and really doesn't ever really want to know about your life, but they just want to rant about theirs, we can have some compassion and understanding for that. It's probably that they're really activated in their nervous system. And it also might not be something that we're wanting to continue with or that we might want to set some boundaries around. Instead of getting off the phone after an hour feeling just agitated and wound up and maybe angry, what could we do? How could we work with that more skillfully? And if it's not something that you want to give or you don't have the capacity for now, then again, we're coming back into making a shift in the relationship, some kind of boundaries. And that's a whole difficult thing all on its own. But we can't do that with any kind of grace or kindness until we know what's going on inside of us and what we sense is going on with them, that we could then check out with them too. We don't need to try and figure it all out on our own. So if you decide that you want to have a conversation with them about the friendship, then we need all of this clarity. So it'd probably be helpful to do a little bit more inquiry as well. But what would you like to say to them? What do you want to know? What do you want to share? If the changes that you want don't really seem possible, then that's something else. If we're open and clear and we're inviting a deeper connection, they might not be interested. They might not have the capacity. So if you were to say something like, I'd like to spend more time together, it seems like you're often tired and I miss the way we used to hang out. Do you want to do that? Do you want to spend more time with each other? And then to read what they might say in words, but also read what they might say in their actions going forward. I had a niece ask me that one time. She said, I'd like to be in closer contact with you. Are you open to that? And I'm like, yes, I'd love to do that. So every month or so now we connect and get together. So sometimes we're just kind of unconscious about what the dynamics are and what we might need, especially with friendships. We tend to get into these habits. Maybe it's something like you're the one who's interrupting and talking over your friend, and you're starting to notice, like, wow, I know that that's because I'm really stressed right now, but that's not how I want to do this. So let's take a couple minutes here to really look into that. What would you say? Put them in front of you like a visual, or imagine that you're sitting down with them. What would you like to say to them? Or maybe you're like, oh, I'm to the point now where I see I don't actually want to do that. And you could just sit with that as well. Stay connected in your body, notice your breath. I think most of us are looking for deep, authentic relationships where we can feel safe with this friend. We can feel like we can bring anything forward, and also we're interested in what they are bringing forward. This is high stakes. It's really important to us that we're going to try to open that up so it's more nourishing. If you notice that as you're thinking about saying that thing to them, making a bid for connection, I'd like to spend more time together. Probably a lot of stuff from junior high and all kinds of times in your earlier life might come in to convince you that that's not safe enough to do that. So we might work with those memories as well. What is it that is holding me back? And is it actually something that's a red flag? I'm not going to go there. Or is it just, this is my habit of not really opening up and I want to change that now? What might you say? And can you tolerate if they don't respond the way you want them to? Remembering that our brain has a negativity bias. What you're predicting is going to happen might not be what happens. Most people are open and wanting deeper connection, especially if they're a friend. Let's just come back to this slide. These are some of the things around cultivating adult friendships that are closer. Notice if any of these came into play in your inquiry. Learning about your attachment style, being respectful of their time, what you want from them. Do they have the capacity? Do they not? And also to be a good friend to ourselves is really the precursor for being a good friend to others. And that we could expect our friends to be good friends, to be respectful and kind, and to move ourselves closer to people that we have that experience with.